Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining the Oracle Integration Partner Community Webcast. I'm Jürgen Kress, part of the product management team. Today, we will update you on the best practices for Oracle integration. With me on the call is Antony Reynolds. Antony, good morning.
Good morning, Jürgen. Good morning, all our attendees. Thank you for joining us today.
So, objective of the call is to train our partners to build better integrations. And the session is for everybody designed who couldn't make it to AI World. There you delivered some similar presentation. And what can we expect today, Antony?
So today we're going to cover about half of what we covered at AI World, but in detail, what to do when you provision an instance, what are the key decisions you make, and what you should do to configure that instance before you create your first integration.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And the second half of your AI World presentation we will cover in a future webcast.
That's
So
right.
with us
I'll
on the
look
call,
forward to talking about the second half, talks more about how you can lock down an Oracle integration instance so that only the networks and machines that you want are allowed to access it.
yeah, there are plenty of changes there. So with us on the call is also Subhani from our team and also Ravi, who will help us with the Q&A. If you have questions, please submit them anytime in the Q&A tool. Quick safe harbor statement. Please pay attention as we might talk about future products. For the housekeeping, please ask your questions via the Q&A tool anytime and share your feedback via the Zoom survey at the end of the webcast. Recording and slides will be available via the community website, and we post the on-demand webcast also on the Video Hub. For today's agenda, I will kick off the call with a brief introduction and then hand over to Antony to give him as much time as possible. And we will answer your questions and read out the good ones at the end of the webcast. So this is one of our last webcasts for this fiscal year, but we finished the year on Thursday with a product update webcast. So we will talk about the latest features and how Oracle integration supports agentic AI. We strongly believe that for better agents, you need to connect to your enterprise applications and you need to give the agent access to your data. Join us on Thursday to learn more, and we will also have a special guest. For the AI, agentic AI feature in Oracle integration, the highlight is that you can expose an existing integration as a toolset in agentic AI. If you want to see it, join our webcast. We will also have a live demo, and we provide now on the Oracle Partner Community website the new SharePoint page, an extra section with a customer presentation and a cheat sheet. So you can start promoting those functionality which is currently in preview to your customer base. We also provide a cheat sheet which trains and gives you some information on the new three-letter acronyms and terms and the features and how you can position it. So that is available together with the early adopter program. So if you would like to learn more or if your customers are interested, please join the early adopter program that Ravi Chaplani is managing. Sign up for it and send us some details about the use case that you would like to build together with us. As part of the program, we build a proof of concept, we train the customer together, and we want to promote the success together with the customer. All information is published in the monthly community newsletter. So if you're not yet a subscriber, please make sure that you register and hopefully you get access to our new SharePoint page where you find the material. Today's webcast is live and we are recording, so please visit Oracle Video Hub for more information. There you can watch all the webcasts, the previous webcasts, like the RPA webcast or the B2B webcast on demand. We also have some hands-on training material there, and if you subscribe, you get notified. With that, Merry Christmas and
Okay. So, as I say, we're going to talk about the provisioning and configuring, and we'll just spend a few minutes also about development as well, and some best practices that we realize many of our customers and partners are not following and will cause them problems in the future if they don't. So let's start off, as Jürgen has mentioned, we've put a lot of effort into the AI features in the latest release, so the Model Context Protocol support. And all of this is to build on top of the existing unified platform to allow you to combine different skill sets, whether you're building an RPA or whether you're doing B2B or whether you're doing straightforward integration. Those skill sets can all collaborate through the project model. And then through links within OIC itself and with log analytics, we can provide insights into how the system is running. And then most important is pragmatic AI at multiple levels. So think of AI as four pillars. The first pillar is you can use AI to generate integrations, to document integrations and projects. Second pillar is you have native actions on the palette, no need to create connections that will allow you to talk to any of the OCI AI services, such as document understanding or speech. The third pillar we have, so the first two are focused on building your integrations and orchestrating AI services. The third pillar is any integration you build can be shared with any agent, either Oracle or non-Oracle, to consume that integration as a model context protocol server, so MCP. So that's how we make the integrations available. You can choose which ones and then share the endpoint with the AI agent of your choice. If you're working in Fusion apps, then it would make sense to use the AI Studio there. If you're working in Salesforce, use the AI tools there. Either of them will be able to consume the model context protocol and use the existing integrations you have. And then the fourth pillar that we have is we will be bringing out, and we're looking for early adopters at this point, an agentic AI actually within OIC that you will give it your intent and it will use the existing integrations to orchestrate a flow based on your needs. So those are the pillars of AI that we'll talk about, but it all comes down to the AI and the agents are useless if you don't have reliable access to your apps, that you don't trust the data, and the automation must be reliable. So we're going to start off talking about provisioning an Oracle instance. We'll then talk about what you should do once you've got your shiny new instance, and then we'll finish up with a slide on some development best practices. So everything you need to jumpstart you into Oracle integration. So let's start with provisioning. What are some of the things that we need to consider when we're provisioning a new OIC instance? Well, we actually have four different ways that we can provision an instance. We can use the user interface. This is probably the one that people are most familiar with. You go in, you say create instance. We'll call this one Jürgen's because he's an important person and deserves his own named instance. And we can choose there the options, the number of message packs, the subscribing to a new license, whether it's development shape or production shape. So very simple to use web form, but can't really automate it. And there's some scenarios that are hard to implement, particularly around some of the network configuration. Next one is the command line. So you can go into OCI and you can use the best thing to do in this is to use the Cloud Shell because that is configured for you automatically. However, you can use any shell as long as you've installed the OCI libraries and have the OCI command line available. This is great because it's scripted, you can automate it. It does sometimes require looking up OSIDs. For example, if you want to connect to a private endpoint, you need to know the OSID of the private endpoint, whereas in the web approach, you can just browse your VCNs to find the OSID of the network you want to connect to. We also support Terraform. This is very useful if you want to combine creation of OIC with other resources. For example, you might have a specific compartment structure that you want. So you create the compartment, you can create the integration within that compartment, and you can potentially create other resources, such as a database as part of that Terraform script. This is great if, for example, you want to create identical environments across multiple regions, because you can set up the Terraform once and then run the script against the different regions. Again, this one, although you might need to look up the OSIDs, if, for example, you were to create the VCN within Terraform, then you could inject those OSIDs directly from the VCN Terraform script. And final option is the API. This is the most complicated way to do it, but you can use any programming language of your choice to use the REST API. Again, all the previous comments around the command line needing to know the OSIDs is there, but also you need to worry now about managing the authentication. Make sure that you've got that correctly set up. And so it is a little more complicated to use the API. Most people are fine with the web form driven approach because they only create 2 or 3 instances. But for some of our customers that have tens of instances, Terraform and command line are commonly used. So what are the decisions we need to make at provisioning time? Well, let's start with the immutable decisions. If you get these wrong, the only way you can change them is delete your integration instance and start again. So you have to choose a region, a name, a shape, whether you're going to use disaster recovery, and the consumption model. So if we have a look over here, I'm here in Phoenix, but I could choose any other region that I've subscribed to. I can then decide what edition I want. This is changeable, but the shape is not. So development shapes will be updated 2 to 3 weeks before production shapes. So that is the only difference between development and production, is when the update occurs. The other thing that is currently unchangeable until probably the middle of next year or possibly a little earlier is disaster recovery. And so if you create a disaster recovery, if you don't create disaster recovery today, you can't convert it. We will be supporting take an existing instance and convert it to disaster recovery going forward. Okay, so let's go back here. So the region, the name, the shape, whether it's disaster recovery, and the consumption model. The consumption model, you're not really seeing very clearly on here because this is a universal credits tenancy. However, if you were to combine, and it's possible to do that now, universal credits with SaaS subscriptions, you would have a choice to choose which one there. So once you've made these decisions, you're kind of committed. These decisions, the changeable ones, you can go back in after you've provisioned an instance and change them. So for example, you can change the compartment that it's in. You can change the edition. You can change the license type of bring your own license. And you also can change the message pack. So if we go back, I'm sorry, Jürgen, I decided not to give you an instance after all. Okay, so if we go into here, we can go into Actions, Edit, and you can see that we can change the edition, we can change the license type, and we can change the number of message packs. We can also, sorry about that. Can't. Okay. This, why won't you go away? Okay. All right. Sorry about that interruption there. Oh, and now my whole, okay. And the block comes up and disappears. All right, sorry. So if we saw there that we could go in and change the number of message packs, the edition, and the license type. So these three features here, and we can also move it to another compartment. So we could move it to this compartment here. We won't do that. So again, we see a number of things that we can change. So now, once we've created our instance, let's look at the options that we have for configuring it and what are the best practices there. So we now have a brand new OIC instance. Let's look at what we can do to configure it. So first of all, remember that there's multiple components within Oracle integration. We've spoken earlier today about the new model context protocol that's available to you with the latest release. You can use the AI assistant, AI workflows in there to orchestrate multiple AI services. But we also have RPA. If you're running the healthcare edition, we have FHIR, MLLP, and HL7 adapters. We have B2B support, where you can set up trading partners and exchange B2B documents. Built-in decision service and the native event service that are all available as part of OIC. These you get automatically. You have no choice whether these are provisioned for you or not. They are automatically provisioned. You also have some optionally provisioned components that you can choose to add. So the file server, you can have an SFTP server attached to your OIC instance. No need to create an FTP to connect to it. It will automatically know how to connect using the native actions on the palette. You can provision Visual Builder for low-code web and mobile app development. Again, that will be auto-configured to connect to integrations for you. And process automation, if you need to simplify human workflows and approvals across multiple applications, that's a great tool to use there. So when we come to it, let's look at what our recommended configuration is. So what are some things you should always do? First of all, you should configure it so that you can take a complete backup of the entire instance. So how on earth would you do that? Well, let's go to an Oracle integration instance here. We go to the settings, and the first thing we do is go to storage. The name is arbitrary, and then we provide the URL of a storage bucket in OIC, and we provide a username and password. We strongly suggest that you do not use an actual employee's username, that you create a special service account, and that you then create a token for that service account. The reason for this is if the employee leaves, that account will probably get locked out because hopefully you've federated it with corporate SSO, as I've done here. And so if the person leaves, suddenly your backups will stop working because you can't access storage anymore. Secondly, if you're putting in passwords, it doesn't really work with multi-factor authentication. And so in this case, we're using a service account and we are using a token that we generated in IAM for that particular account. Once we've configured the object storage, the next step is to set up the import and export. So in order to do that, we can go to the import and export. Note, when you click save, it will validate that these are our correct username, password, and URL. So import and export. So if I want to, I can say, hey, I'd like to make a backup. Um, so I'm going to call this one backup OIC2 for partner webcast. Say, I'm going to include the security artifacts. So that means that all my usernames and passwords and tokens will be included in the export. If you don't want that, you can just turn it off. So what the export does is it gives us a complete backup of our Oracle integration instance. All the integrations, all the projects, all the decisions, everything is pushed out into a bucket. And then later on, if you, for example, have completely messed things up, you can re-import it to pull things back. We'll show you a better way to do that at the finer grain, where if you mess up in an integration, you can restore it. But this is how you make a complete backup of your entire environment. You should also set up notifications for your email recipients and enable the reports and alerts so that you know what's going on with your instance. These are configured in the notifications section. So you can see I'm the recipient for these notifications. We can send the reports hourly or daily, which will give you a summary of the number of messages processed and any failures that might occur. You can also set up alerts if there's any critical health problems or expiring certificates. And you need to provide a username. Oh, we'll come to this other half in a second. Okay, we recommend that you use the OCI email service for sending emails from OIC. The reason for this is that you get better control with the OCI email service. You can see exactly what's going on. You can see the backlog of emails. You also only then have to configure DKIM once within that email service. And so this section here, I've said use my SMTP configuration. You need to create an SMTP username, and there's a special location in IAM to create those. The passwords do not expire on those SMTP accounts. And then you can fill in the default sender's email address. And you can have two different ones, one for system notifications and the other for alerts. So this then allows you are no longer bound by the limits in OIC on the number of emails that you can send. So that's another good reason why you want to go to the SMTP setup. And finally, you should assign the groups and roles, groups to roles within IAM. We highly recommend that you access to OIC instance for groups, not users. It's very easy to add users to groups as their roles change, and you often can use the same group for multiple things because that group should have access to a common set of resources. So these are things that you should always do for every instance. Make sure that you've configured backup, notification that you're using the OCI email service, and that you've assigned the groups to the roles that they need. Additional options that you might want to do, first of all, is the private endpoint. So if we look at configuring a private endpoint, we go to the networking. And I can say, okay, choose a private endpoint. I can choose which compartment I'm in. And then I can choose the network. I can go in again, choose the compartment for the subnet, and I can put it, for example, onto the private subnet. And at this point, I can then create, and it will now, it's updating the OIC instance, and it's creating the private endpoint for me. So the private endpoint allows you to access resources on an OCI VCN without having to have the connectivity agent. So you can access private addresses with no need for any agents. Through suitable networking magic, you can route that traffic to anywhere that the private network is able to get to. So that could include on-prem across Fast Connect. It could include another region through dynamic routing gateways. There's lots of options as to how you configure that network. But the key thing is that your traffic will never go over any public IPs if you use the private endpoint. Next thing is you may want to restrict who can access your OIC instance. And so this we have within the access control lists. Let's choose a different instance as that one's updating. So if we go again into networking, we see at the bottom here, we have network access. And so in this case, this is a very highly locked down environment. So the HTTP and file server can only be accessed by that one address, which happens to be a NAT gateway on a VCN. So we've restricted access to anybody on the VCN effectively that uses that NAT gateway. For the other restriction we have is that we allow people to come in from anywhere on that same VCN. And so this is the VCN OSID. You have the option to copy it there. So you can restrict the access based on either the IP addresses or CIDR blocks or a virtual cloud network OSID. And similarly to what we saw in the private endpoint, it's really easy to set that up by browsing for the named VCN. You don't have to grab the OSID yourself. Okay, another thing that I highly recommend is we have added support for GitHub within OIC. And so if we look within our OIC instance, we have a repository field. In this repository, we can see I've provided a username for GitHub, the name of the repository, the branch where I want the information to go, and then a token ID that was generated by GitHub to authenticate. And so when you do this, here is the integration folder that we talked about. And so we have just the one active branch at the moment, integrations. And when we go in there, we see that automatically underneath it, it creates a deployment and a projects. And why would it do that? Because when I go to a project, for example, I've got a deployment here. I can say export. And previously, you could just export to a file, which meant that you had to manually move things through your CI/CD process. That is still supported, and you can move things into a file. But now you can export directly to the repository. And so if I click export to the repository, it tells me that it's going to export it as developed. And it's going to use this particular deployment. In this case, the deployment only has one flow in it. And so now we see there that it's pushed it to the repository. So if I go into deployments, you see that this car file is now in GitHub. We can see that it was committed just now because literally I just pushed it. And you could then use this to kick off a CI/CD pipeline. For example, Visual Builder Studio has built-in commands to take a deployment and push it into a higher environment. So let's That's the CI/CD. If you're not using GitHub, strongly recommend you have some other automated environment to push the traffic into a managed pipeline. So data retention. By default, you have a maximum data retention of 32 days. However, if we over here, you see data retention is 32 days. So your activity streams in production mode will last for 32 days. If you want to, you can increase this to 3 months or 6 months. And so this would give you a longer period of time to review your integrations in the OIC console. There is a charge for this. We add an additional 10% to your message consumption for 3 months and 20% for 6 months, I believe are the right numbers. So very easy to extend the data retention. And remember, we talked about other things you could enable. We can see the file servers enabled, Visual Builder and process automation are not enabled here. And then within the file server, we need to set up the users, directories, and access permissions. And so if we have a look in here, we can again go to settings. There's a file server setting. Okay, looks like, okay, file server isn't enabled on here. But this is where you would be able to set up the users and other settings. And actually, if we quickly open the console on this one, oh, of course, I told you this was a lockdown one. I'm not on the appropriate VCN. So file servers, make sure you have users or groups assigned to the file server directories for permissions. And make sure that those permissions are set correctly. Some additional recommended configurations. We talked about private endpoints. This reduces the load on the connectivity agent, improves the security of your environment. We talked also about access control lists. You can have separate access control lists for FTP and HTTPS traffic. And we will soon be releasing the ability to have the design time access control list separate from the runtime access control list, so that only your developers can have access to the design time, but your partners can have access to the runtime. We recommend that you use tags to help identify instances. So if I have a look here on my instance, I've created a namespace. The Oracle tags are automatically created for you. The Enterprise OIC namespace, I've got a tag that says what type of environment it is, and it says that it's a non-production environment. This is useful because I can now search and say, hey, search for all the non-production environments just by looking for a tag. There's lots of other things you could use tags for, such as the team that might be administering it could be identified, or you might have the particular role that that instance plays. We talked about the data retention, 3 to 6 months, and the alternative to that is to use OCI logging. OCI logging allows you to send the activity stream to OCI logs. You can then set up a connector to send the logs to Log Analytics. We'll also soon be adding the ability to send the logs directly to Log Analytics. That has the benefit that OCI logging has a lower message size limit than Log Analytics. So you can send a larger portion of the payload with a direct link to Log Analytics. And you can store, if you send the activity stream to OCI logs, you can store it for as long as you're willing to pay. The first 10 gigabytes of storage is free. So depending on your needs, you may be able to get some free storage from Oracle there for your activity streams. We are also, and will soon be releasing support not just for the activity stream, but for the audit log so that you'll be able to see who edited integrations and connections. And also we'll be adding support for the file server so that you'll be able to see who uploaded a file, who downloaded a file, who deleted the file. And I always think of the audit and the file server as the big stick logs that when something goes wrong, you look up in the log who you need to take a big stick and beat because they broke things for you. So in terms of setting it up, you can go to the logs. At the moment, we just have the activity stream. There'll be 2 more entries in here in the near future. And we can see that I'm sending it to a log called OIC1 activity stream as part of the dev log group. And those logs are then going through a service connector and are delivered to OCI log analytics, where we can do things like manage a fleet of integrations. So we've talked about what you need to think about when you create an instance. We've talked about the things that you should do when you have got a shiny new instance, that you should configure it for backup. You should configure the access controls for it. Lots of things that that will make your life easier. And so now we want to talk about some development tips. You've got a shiny new instance and you're ready to create your first integration. And so what you do is you say, okay, what you do not want to do is go to design and integrations and say create. This is bad, 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 bad. And we'll explain why on this slide. So our recommendation is that for your very first integrations and all other integrations that follow them, you should put them into projects. So we can add a new project. We'll call it Jürgen. Oops. It immediately starts saying, well, hang on, what are you trying to do? Let's say, hey, I want to read files from FTP server and load into a database. Okay, so it starts giving me some suggestions of recipes or accelerators that are available, or I can create a new project. So this is using some of those AI capabilities to help me. I can now name the new project because I didn't find one I liked. And I can start off by saying anybody can edit this. But we can always change that access. And so now we create the project. And we immediately see that our integrations, connections, lookups, libraries, and events are all available on the home screen. We've got separate tabs for deployments and observability. We also have the ability to run AI agents. So our model context protocol servers will be marked there. And in there, we'll identify which integrations we want to expose. Again, we have RPA robots here that we can set up. We have decision services, healthcare options, and finally B2B settings, all within one place, so that, for example, your B2B people can work in the same project as your integration specialists and your RPA specialists. And then when you've got your working integrations, it's very easy to decide which ones should be exposed as tools for consumption by AI agents, either in OIC, in Fusion Apps, in Visual Builder, in the database, or in a third-party AI agent. if you want to restrict access to the project, it's as easy as going in here. And maybe I don't want anybody to edit, but I guess I told Jürgen that this was going to be his project. So maybe I'll let him edit. And I'll maybe even make him an owner. Let's promote him. There we go, Jürgen. Don't abuse it. So that's how easy it is. Where did it get those users from? They are any registered user in the IAM that we're using. So if you have federated IAM, you won't see the users until they log into OCI. Once they log into OCI, a shadow account will be created in IAM, and that account will show here. So Jürgen can now log into this instance using his single sign-on. Doesn't have to have a special sign-on to it. So we talked there about access control. Generally would recommend that you don't assign permissions to Jürgen specifically. You give it to groups. It's easy to add and remove people from groups, and you often are using those groups for multiple things. The administrator role, if you're an administrator, you can override the project access control. So if the last person in a group who's the owner of a project leaves, an administrator can still go in and fix things. But all the other roles are restricted. So if you're a developer, just because you're a developer, for example, Nathan or Subani or Ravi Chablani can't edit. They can view. I can say, hey, maybe the people that can view will leave it to Ravi and Subani and Nathan. Oh, a lot of Nathans or Naths using it. Okay, so even though these people might have been given developer privileges on the instance, they can only view in this project. They can't edit. So that's a useful feature as well, so that you can have different roles with different projects. Now, the challenge with putting things in a project is, well, what happens with common things like error handling or utilities or connections? So let's go back here. And for example, if I go in here, this connection, I have the option when I edit its info to share it with other projects. When I share it with other projects, it means that I can configure the connection in this project and perhaps not give other people ability to edit that connection, but they can still use the connection in other projects. And so that allows you, for example, a good practice is to have a connection project where you put all your connections, or maybe multiple connection projects, perhaps an HCM connection project and a finance connection project. Somebody who knows the passwords is given edit access to those, but nobody else is perhaps even allowed to view those. And the person who's administering that project makes sure that he shares it, the connections with other people. Okay, the other thing is that we now have access to the repository. We saw that earlier when we were using when we were using the deployment, but we can also export the whole project. So if I export the whole project, I don't want to do a deployment. I just want the whole project. So here I can see I've got two deployments. I'm not going to use them. I hit export, and now that's been initiated. We wait just a few seconds usually, and we'll get another little pop-up. Oops. Okay, hang on, did I? Okay, so export to repository. Sorry, I exported to a file. And now we should get a little pop-up there saying, yep, it's been published. Now, because we did this at the project level and we didn't choose a deployment, if we go into my GitHub repository, we see that nothing's changed in here. Well, that sucks, but let's go to projects and I can see that I have the whole project, all its integrations, connections, events, robots, etc., has all been exported to here. And we can see that was done now. So that's why we have projects is for backups of your project. So this is, creating a backup of the whole instance in object storage is a nice idea, and it's good to do on a regular basis. So that you can restore in case somebody accidentally deletes your whole OIC instance. But the projects allow you to take a backup of all the work. So it's probably a good thing just before you leave for the day is export the project into GitHub, and there it will be revisioned with every other resource in GitHub. So we use the repository. Schedules, some development best practices. If you just need to kick off processing of a file, schedules, the next schedule will not run until the current one has completed. You can avoid this being a problem if, for example, you're going, let me list all the files. Okay, I'm now going to move that file to another location. That's very quick. I now want to process the file. Rather than process the file in the schedule, call an async flow to process the file, because then you're not blocking the schedule anymore. So that's one tip around schedules. Also, we get asked about concurrency limits. So within OIC, concurrency limits are based on the number of message packs you've subscribed to. So if you subscribe to one message pack, you can have up to 100 concurrent integrations running synchronously, query response format, and 50 running asynchronously, so fire and forget. If you call an async integration, that will increment the async count. If you've reached your limit, we will queue it up. And we'll still send you a response saying we've accepted it. It will just take a little bit longer before it starts executing. Local invoke does not increment the sync count because a local invoke is effectively handing the flow of control from the parent to the child integration. So you're still only using one thread or one concurrency. However, if you decide not to use the local invoke and do a loopback, by a loopback, we mean that you've used an explicit connection to call an integration, one integration from another, then that will increment the sync count because you've come back through the front door. And at the front door, we add the sync count. I should also add that when we're talking about concurrency, if you use parallel actions, for the async parallel actions, those will wait the same way as others if there aren't enough, if you've exceeded your concurrency limit. But for sync, if you make a sync call, we will increment the number of your concurrency level, but we will not stop that internal call from happening because you've already got a running integration. But it may mean that another brand new integration won't be able to run because you've exceeded the sync limit. Okay, with that said, we've talked now about what to think about when you provision, what you should do to configure it, and some best practices. The most important best practice is to use projects. One reason that I didn't mention is every new feature we are doing is with projects. I was on a call with a customer last Friday, and he said, I'm looking forward to all these new AI features. When are you delivering them? I said, they're already in your instance, but they are only available in projects. And so there are ways, and perhaps in a future session, we'll talk about how to move from standalone global namespace integrations into projects. But remember, you have a great tool in Oracle integration, very easy to connect apps and data. We can automate the processes. And now with the new AI tooling, it's possible to expose all of those capabilities to agents either running in OIC or running in other apps such as Fusion or Salesforce or Workday or in standalone agentic platforms. So, with that in mind, I'd like to wish you happy holidays, season's greetings to all of you, and thank you for your time today. And thank you to the PMs who were on the call answering questions.
Anthony, that was fabulous, like every year, and thanks for the nice happy holiday picture. We do have a couple of questions, and I would like to read out some of them. Can you talk more about CI/CD pipeline management?
Okay, so basically, when we go into GitHub, we saw the recommendation would be that your pipeline would be monitoring for new check-ins in GitHub. For example, you can do this within Visual Builder Studio. So you can say, hey, when a new deployment arrives, automatically deploy it into a higher environment, into a test environment. You probably want to automatically deploy for test. You probably don't want to do that for production. So again, within Visual Builder Studio, you can put in a human in the loop step where it says, hang on, this has got to be approved by certain people before it can be deployed to production. Now that's using Visual Builder Studio. You could do the same thing with OCI developer tools. You could do it with your own favorite CI/CD pipeline if you're not using either of the two Oracle products there. So hopefully that explained a little bit more about how the CI/CD works. The benefit of using Visual Builder Studio is it understands deployments and projects and connections, so you can configure a connection from within a pipeline as well.
Yeah, there's a question from Mohammed on CI/CD projects. Does it also support filtering of integrations which are still under development?
Okay, so Mohammed as new to projects, and this is a very important thing to understand about projects, is that you should never, ever, ever push a project into a deployment pipeline. Never. That would be a really bad thing to do because it will take every revision of every project, of every integration in your project and push it out. So if we have a look here in my demos, I've got a couple of different revisions of integration. If I go into deployments, if I create a deployment, so this might be release version 1, I create the deployment. I can then say, okay, if there's more than one integration in here, I can choose which integration I want. So you can choose in a deployment which integrations are there, and you can decide which specific version. By default, we pick the latest, but here we could go, actually, we're still working on the latest. We want you to push this version. And then when we save that, when we then go in, go in here and say, okay, I'd like to export, it will now only export version 1.0 of that specific integration. So hopefully, Mohammed, that explains how we choose which integrations go into our deployment pipeline, and which revisions of those integrations. You can only have one revision, one minor revision of an integration in that pipeline. So, for example, if I very quickly go in and say, create a new version, version 2, so this is a major version change. And now I go into here and say, hey, I want to edit this. You see that now version 2 is also available, but I don't want to deploy it yet. This is why we should always use deployments for our deployment pipeline.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Anthony. So for everybody, like Anthony mentioned, if you're not yet a member in the partner community, please make sure you register, make use of the community website, and there are plenty of integration resources. Anthony is a frequent blogger and the whole team also, so please use the blog, blogs.oracle.com/integration. Make use of the documentation and the Live Labs material. The documentation is really good and it includes some hands-on training called Live Labs. And if you have implemented a successful Oracle integration, please let us know. All the links are available on the resource page, so take a look. If you have further questions, feel free to reach out to the team. The local head experts are Neil in EMEA, Paulo in South America, Ravi in North America, Ravi Pinto in Asia, and Steve and myself for any kind of marketing questions. Take a look at the resources for partners and for customers. We really try to support you. And with that, we would like to say thank you, Merry Christmas, and hope to see you on Thursday. Thank you to the whole team. Thanks for attending.